Please join me in welcoming our speaker for today, the Reverend Bob Trask.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Unity of Vancouver, for the deep and wonderful honor of being able to address you today. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about an age of miracles, and we're going to talk about that we live in an age of miracles. And I'm going to be holding up a sheet of paper from time to time because I'm going to be reading because I have quite a bit of stuff to talk to you about today. So forgive me if you see me glancing down at my sheet of paper. We live in an age of miracles. You know that. You know that. And there's no part of you, no part of your life that's not being blessed and protected by Holy Spirit. You are, in fact, an incarnation of Holy Spirit. But the blessings, the incredible power that can flow into you from Holy Spirit is not available to you unless you're available to it. And quite often we're not available. And we're not available because we have all of these doubts and we have all of these unworthinesses going on. And we've learned those from the time we were a little child, to be humble. And to be humble means to be self-effacing. It means to be the very first person to put yourself down. And there's only one person in the world that loves you totally, completely, unconditionally, forever, and that's you. And if I can't count on your love for you, then there's no other love that's worthy of you. And Holy Spirit, the great mind, the great consciousness that is all, the great creator, that which we call God, that has always been and always will be, out of which comes all of the reality that we see, the universe, the things, all of that being constructed, not was constructed, being constructed by that great, powerful consciousness. And, I know that it says in the scriptures that God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. Well, I love the scriptures, but almost all the scriptures are metaphors for reality. They're not describing reality. They're describing reality through a metaphor, through an example, through a story. God isn't a he, number one. It's not a she either. And God didn't create the world in 6 days and on the seventh day rested. The world is still being created right now. It's in the act of being created. There's nothing finished. A rock sitting in your garden is not finished. It's still evolving. The atoms, the subatomic particles are still moving. The rock is still developing. It's wearing away or it's building. It's everything is in the act of creation, including you. And today, if you'll stay with me, I think I can almost prove to you that thing, that great power, that great consciousness that we call Holy Spirit is in fact you. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but hang with me. I'm going to tell you some stories. The first one is that a woman who, after a C-section, fell unconscious from a rare amniotic fluid embolism that's most often fatal. An amniotic fluid embolism is so rare that it only happens in like 12 out of 100,000 cases. It's very rare. And what happens is that some amniotic fluid goes into the into the circulatory system, into the blood circulatory system of the woman, and the body reacts to it in a way so that it begins to clot the blood and shut everything down. And it's quite often fatal to the woman and to the baby. Well, the woman's heart stopped beating, and the doctors did everything they could to save her. They did CPR, they hooked her up, they did everything they could. They worked for 45 minutes, and for 45 minutes, she had no pulse. No pulse. She was dead. The doctors gave up, and they went out and they said to her family, I'm sorry, we did everything we could, but we've lost her. If you want to come in and say your goodbyes, then please do so. So the family fluttered into the room and surrounded her. And they began to tell her how much they loved her. They began to tell her, excuse me, how precious she is. And they continued to tell her that. And after a while, her heart started beating. And now she's not only alive, she's completely well. And she suffered no brain damage from that 45 minutes. Now, I was a paramedic, and I can tell you, as anybody can that's been in the medical business, that you can only go 4 minutes until your brain cells start dying. 4 minutes without oxygen. In 5 to 6 minutes, you're brain dead, you're done. Done, you're toast. She went 45 minutes with no pulse, and she's 100% fine. 4 police officers had learned that there was a car that overturned in a river, icy cold river, icy cold. Only the wheels were sticking up. So they went and they stood on the bank and they looked down and they heard a voice calling to them. Help me, please help me. The fire department arrived and the firemen also heard it. Help me, help me. They couldn't be coming from the car's underwater. Help me, a little voice. So they waded out in this freezing cold water, formed a line of these guys out in this freezing cold water and ducked down and looked inside. And Lily, an 18-month-old little girl, strapped in her car seat upside down, just above the freezing water. Just above the freezing water. And they got her out. And they passed her from one man to the other till they got her back to the bank. She had been hanging there upside down in freezing weather for 14 hours, dressed in only little skimpy clothes. And the medical people, they just were baffled how she could still be alive. Number one, how she could be alive after the wreck. Number two, how she could have been without any water, without any nutrition, in skimpy little clothes, in freezing weather, hanging above that freezing cold water for 14 hours. And also no one could explain how they heard her little voice, help me, help me. Is there such a thing as a true miracle? Is every day a miracle? Who's working those miracles? God? You and God? You as God? Here's another miracle story. A boy about 2 years old was out playing with his brothers in the backyard, and he went missing. And they couldn't find him anywhere. So they went in and got their mom. Their mom came out, called him. She called him. You know, where are you? Where are you? Finally, she realized that this creek that ran through their backyard was swollen at that time of the year from the snow. She thought maybe he'd fallen in the creek. So she conducted a massive search, got everybody in the neighborhood, got the law, everybody trying to find him. And it was quite a while before they found him. A quarter of a mile downstream, he was caught up in the branches of a tree, and the water was flowing over him and around him. And the rescuers pulled him in, and the paramedics got there, and he had no pulse. He was done. So they did CPR. They did CPR till they got him to the ambulance. They did CPR in the ambulance. The ambulance went to a place where there was a helicopter. They did CPR in the helicopter. The helicoptered him to a hospital, took him into an emergency room. They did CPR in the emergency room. His body temperature was 70 degrees, 20 degrees, more than 20 degrees below normal. More than 20 degrees below normal. He was practically frozen. 20 doctors and 20 nurses gathered around, holding him in the light, doing everything they could to save him. And when his temperature, and they continued to do CPR as they slowly warmed him up, when his temperature got up to 82 degrees, his heart started beating again. Now, he's well, he's whole, he's completely normal. So is this a miracle? Was it the outpouring of love from all the people in his neighborhood, from his family, and for all the people around him? Are our bodies miracles that we take for granted? What is a miracle? We think of miracles as unexpected things that just kind of happen, that, that couldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened. That's a miracle. But what if miracles are commonplace? What if commonplace miracles are going on every single day? A young man was thrown from his car. He was thrown from his car, and he broke every bone in his body, the doctor said. He crushed his lungs. His lungs were crushed. He had broken ribs poking into his lungs. He was, when they got him to the hospital, he was clinically dead, but they hooked him up on machines and got his organs working through the machines. And I can tell you from my very limited medical experience, I don't know how they got oxygen into him with his lungs collapsed like that, but they did. And they were able to keep him moderately alive. And he was in that state of barely alive for 10 days. And then he opened his eyes and said to his father, "I love you." His father, who was there looking over him, he said, "I love you." How is that possible? Is his recovery a miracle? Did the love of his father and the other people play a part in that? Is normal life a miracle? Here I have got my papers out of order, so give me a second. These technical things happen. Well, I seem not to have that, but I know the story anyway. There was a little boy who died. He was born dead, and the doctors did everything they could to resuscitate him. They worked on him for 20 minutes. They did CPR. They breathed into his little mouth. They did everything. And finally, after 20 minutes, it's a long time with doctors working on him, they went out and told his mom and dad, "I'm afraid your son's dead. But if you want to go in and hold him a little bit, then, please do that." So they went in, closed the door, and the woman was laid down on the bed, and the nurse came over and placed the baby on the mother's chest. And they loved him. And the mom and dad just held him and loved him and whispered to him. And after 5 minutes, he moved. And the dad went running out into the hall and found the doctor and said, he moved. And the doctor said, "These are after-death reflexes. They commonly happen." Don't worry about it. It's normal. He is dead. So the father went back and closed the door, and he and the mother continued to hold the little baby and to feel his little feet and his little toes and hands and to brush back his little hair and to love him and talk to him and hold him. And they did that for 2 hours, 2 hours. And then he opened his eyes. And then he opened his eyes. And the father again ran out and got the doctor. And this time he was able to coax the doctor to come back in. And the doctor came in, put a stethoscope on the baby's chest, and he said, "I don't believe it. I just don't believe it." Is this a miracle? Jamie and his twin sister are now 10 years old, and they're completely normal. And Jamie has not had one health issue since. Do planets circulate and rotate around their suns or whatever? Does all that motion happen? What is the force of that motion? Electromagnetic force? What is it? What is it? Gravity? What is that? Is the force of the universe love? Oh, I know that's a little strange. Oh, we're going to go all the way there, are we, Bob? Is it love? Could it be love? Could it be that love is the only energy? Could it be that electromagnetic energy and electrical energy and the greater and lesser forces of energy, could it be that all of those energies are the result of love? Like this light that's shining on me right now. It's shining on me as a result of electricity. It's not electricity. It's shining on me as a result of electricity. What if all these forces and all this action and all this motion in the world is all a force of love? And what if love is actually a presence, a being? I have some other things here. Let me just see if I can find them. Bear with me. Oh, it should be really embarrassing that I get my papers out of order. But unfortunately for you, it's not. In 1981, 2 groups of men in their 70s and 80s, eight men in each group, were taken to a monastery. And in that monastery, the first group went to the monastery, and everything in the monastery was 22 years before. Like there was nothing current. There were newspapers that were 22 years old. There were magazines that were 22 years old. The television was set up to be black and white, and it was 22 years old. All the pictures that were shown, all of this, the newsreels and all of the sitcoms, everything were 22 years old. Everything was 22 years old. And the men were asked if they would please, for the 5 days that they would be there, for 5 days, if they would please pretend with each other and with themselves that they were 22 years younger. Just pretend that for 5 days, 24 hours a day. And so they did. And they stayed for 5 days. And then they went back home. And the researchers did a plethora of tests on their bodies, on their minds, on their emotions, on everything. And then a second group came for 5 days. These men, when they got there, everything was normal. Everything was current. Magazines, newspapers, television, radio, everything was current. Today's news, everything was current. But they were also asked to please pretend for the 5 days that they were 22 years younger. Just pretend that you're 22 years younger. And so they did. And so at the end of 5 days, they also went through the extensive testing. Now, the researchers discovered improvements in height, weight, and gait. The men grew tall, all the men grew taller, their joints became more flexible, their fingers lengthened as their arthritis diminished, their eyesight and hearing got better, memories sharpened, and they scored higher on mental tests. The first group, the guys that went in and they had all of the stuff set up for 22 years before, they improved 63%. 63%. The other group only improved 44%. 44% just by pretending that they were 22 years younger. What if you and I were to just start pretending that we were 20 years younger than we are? What if we just tried to convince ourselves that we're 20 years younger than we are? I wonder what would happen. With these guys, it worked. Why wouldn't it work with you? Why wouldn't it work with me? What happens to our minds as we grow older? What kind of attitudes do we get? And the people around us, they begin to treat us with deference because we're old. You're old. I'm 81 years old. Some people treat me like I can barely get around. It's interesting to me. But if we pretend that we're younger, then our bodies get younger. And one of the reasons that happens is because the mind, the brain, which is a large part of functioning how our body works, the brain does not know the difference between reality and fantasy. It doesn't. You know that to be true because you fantasize things and it's made your body react. You fantasize things. When you were younger, you probably fantasized, had sexual fantasies, and you could feel your body react. When you can feel your body react, when you imagine rage, or when you imagine a terrible axe murderer coming after you, body reacts. What if you imagined yourself being 20 years younger and you let your body react? Again, we live in the age of miracles, and you are one. There's no part of you that's not blessed and filled and protected by Holy Spirit, but you must recognize it and be available for it in order for it to be you. I've lived a long time, and I've been very fortunate in my life, very fortunate. I dropped out of school after the 10th grade, and I never had any more what you might call academic education. I didn't go back to school. I didn't go to college. So I had the wonderful, wonderful opportunity, though I didn't know it was an opportunity at the time, to live kind of on the streets. I don't mean that I was homeless. I was never homeless. I dropped out of school so that I could help support my brothers and sisters and my family. But when you're a high school dropout, at that time, I could make 75 cents an hour. Started off when I was 12 years old, working 10 hours a day for $1 a day. $1 a day. And then eventually I got a job scraping the cement off of bricks and stacking them on a pallet for a penny a brick. So if I did 100 bricks in a day, I got $1. And I got up to, I was making $1 an hour washing dishes or pumping gas. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. And then I took a GED test in order to get a job in a standard station, and I got all the way up to $1.25 an hour. But I worked for so many years, and when you don't have any education, you go for a lot of jobs. Now, yeah, they're low-paying jobs, but they're all full of experience. They're all full of people, and the people are all different. I remember back so many of those people that I worked with and that I met. They all taught me. They taught me about life. They taught me about who they were. They were from different parts of the country. Some of them from the mountains in Appalachia. Some of them from downtown New York. I worked with lots and lots of people who were college graduates. And then eventually I started doing work on boats, and I was a singer, and I was an actor, and I was a comedian, and I was an ambulance driver, and I did the work to become EMT and a paramedic, and then I went on and got a job on a boat and worked myself up and took the Coast Guard exams and became a licensed sea captain, and on and on and on. I did all of those things. All of those things were schooling for me. All of them were schooling for me. Every one of them. And I learned and I learned and I learned. And all of that time I was growing and I was learning. And I was so blessed Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, I could never have gotten the education I got. And part of the education that I got was not to be like others. So I had a high school reunion. I think it was my 30th or something. I didn't graduate, but I was I was um, I was contacted by the high school and said there's going to be a high school reunion, and you were in the class that eventually graduated, and why don't you come to the reunion? And so I went to the reunion, and my wife and I went, and were in the lobby of the hotel, and we went to the room and went in and met all of the wonderful people that I was in high school for with. All of them looked really old, but you know, I I had not been around people my age. I had not been around any peers of no high school or college or anything, so I didn't have anything to compare myself with. And then little by little, um, we got around to the place where the ex-class president was making an announcement, and he had me a high school diploma that was actually signed by the high school principal from when I was in high school, and it's a legal diploma. So now I'm a high school graduate. But I'm here to tell you that you have had a big life, and it's filled with so many experiences. And those are all memories. And they're all building blocks in your life. And every step of the way, like me, you were being guided. There was no accidents. There were no mistakes. Every step of the way, you were being guided. When you came into this incarnation, you came in with a purpose. And the purpose was to experience life in every form that you could, so that you would grow in wisdom and joy. And the second part of your mission was to express that wisdom and joy, so that you would uplift the world around you, and so that you would send that wisdom and joy back into Holy Spirit. But you know, a lot of times when I talk about that Holy Spirit, and so you came out of that great sea of consciousness, you kind of like evaporated out of that great sea of consciousness, so that you're like a drop from the sea. And people say, well, you are a drop of water from the great sea of consciousness, of the great sea of God, and you will drop back into the water and dissolve into the sea. And there's a part of you that rightfully says, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, I'm a drop of the water. You know, I know who I am. I'm an individual. I have individuality. I have a mind. I have a brain. I have a personality. I have memories. I have thoughts. I don't want that all just dissolve into this great big pool of consciousness and I disappear. But what if that individual consciousness is a temporary consciousness? And what if your permanent consciousness is the consciousness of God? What if your permanent consciousness is the consciousness of Holy Spirit, of the great mind, of the one? Then you truly, as this physical body, are a miracle, because you're an ongoing creation day by day of Holy Spirit, of God. And every single thing you've done, every day of your life, the getting up and the going down to sleep, everything you've done, the making love, the making breakfast, the getting sick, the getting well, the grieving, the heartache, the heartbreak, every single thing you've done was there to help you grow in wisdom and joy. And you experienced that. And your purpose and your message and your mission is to express that in whatever way you can. Even if it's just to reach out to somebody and say, I love you. You are sending a powerful blessing of grace into them when you do that. When we opened this service, Edith sang the song, I love you, I love you, I love you. She might have well been saying, I bless you, I bless you, I bless you. She might as well have been saying, I am you, I am you, I am you. Because as we're all individual incarnations from Holy Spirit is one and so are we. So these stories that I read to you today, these stories that I told you, they blew people's minds away when they happened. Woman, 45 minutes with no pulse. She comes back and she's perfectly normal. Little baby, they work on him 20 minutes and he can't possibly be alive, and he is, because his parents held him and loved him for 2 hours and then he opened his eyes. Little boy caught underwater and in the water, and he's got a temperature of 70 degrees, and then he comes back and he's got a heartbeat, and now he's perfectly, totally normal. That's not possible. And we love the impossible. Walt Disney said, I love doing the impossible. It's so much fun. What he didn't say, and it's really true, is also there's no competition. So if you and I will just acknowledge today that we are, in fact, not only incarnations of the great consciousness of the one mind, but that we are the great consciousness, the one mind. It's not, what stops us isn't our humility. Oh, I can't say that I'm God. Oh, I would be being so arrogant to say that I am God. No, you know what? It's arrogance to say you're not. If it's true, then it's arrogance to say you're not. Because you're allowing your ego, which demands that you be an individual, unique person here in this incarnation, and that's all. That's what your ego demands of you. It's saying your ego, get out of the way. I'm more than that. I am not my ego. I am one with eternity. I am one with God. Didn't Jesus say, I and the Father are one? What was he saying? He might as well have been saying, the Father and I are one. You might as well be saying, Holy Spirit and I are one. Because you are, and you and I are one. We are the same in different bodies. I so appreciate you. I hope you will just go out and light fires in other people's hearts today. Thank you for being with me. Thank you so much for allowing me to talk to you today. I love you.
The mountains rise in splendor, the sun bursts forth anew. Small birds all join in chorus, and green leaves are tipped with dew. I reach to feel this perfect day, that everything I see is the world I am creating with the power I have in me. It's the world I am creating with the power I have in me. My heart is truly dancing as I turn to you and say, this light that we are sharing glows brighter every day. The wonder in my soul right now is always bursting free. It's the love I am creating. It's the love I am creating. It's the love I am creating with the power I have in me. And I live my dreams, and my dreams come true, and my heart it sings with love for you. beauty that we're all made of. We're miracles created by the power of our love. We are miracles created with the power of our love. And all my soul is pouring forth, my arms held open wide. My joy in you comes shining through. There's nothing I have to hide. I stand to praise with all my soul, that everyone might see this world I am creating. This world I am creating. This world I am creating with the power I have in me. And I live my dreams, and my dreams come true. And my heart it sings with love for you. All the beauty that we're all made of, little miracles unrated with the power of our love. We are miracles created with the power of God's love. The mountains rise in splendor, the sun bursts forth anew. Small birds all join in chorus, and green leaves are tipped with dew. I reach to feel a perfect day that everyone might see. The world I am creating with the power I have in me. It's the world I am creating with the power I have in me.
Thank you, Edith. That was absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
I hope everybody appreciates that we're not only enjoying your beautiful voice, but also your beautiful poetry. And
Thank
that
you.
everybody knows that you are an incredibly prolific poet. I believe you write like a poem a day or more. And it's just a blessing to have you here on this morning.
Thank
In
you.
listening to Bob this morning, it made me rethink. I had something I was thinking of sharing under the topic of good news. And then I thought, no, I don't want to rush it, but I now need to share it. It was just quickly a story of Evelyn, who was pregnant. And the doctor came to her very, very early on after confirming her pregnancy and said, we've checked and you actually have a rare condition in your reproductive system where you'll be unable to carry this baby to term. There is sort of a biomechanical defect and the baby will come out too soon. So as they told this to Evelyn and her husband, they said the best thing really is to simply go home and just allow the miscarriage to happen. So they looked at the doctor and then they whispered to each other and they said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to stay in the hospital. And they accessed family resources. They stayed in the hospital. And sure enough, at 22 months, Evelyn gave birth to this little premature baby. And as you can see, he's hooked up to all kinds of medical devices. And the doctors and nurses, there were a variety of reasons why it was a low probability that this child would survive. And they have a practice in this particular hospital of suggesting to the parents of premature babies that they get some kind of an object that they can photograph the baby with. And then when it grows, they can always look back to how small it was. But in this instance, there was some hesitation because they thought this child's probably not going to live. But one of the nurses took it upon herself to suggest this to Evelyn, and Evelyn said, told her husband, go out and find something that we can take, that we can disinfect and then put in the incubator with the baby. And what was interesting is he came back with this, an action figure of Superman. And that action figure is 12 inches tall. And I think it's a great example of our ability to see the light in others. They put this action figure of Superman next to this child, and they saw this child as Superman. And after I believe it's 105 days in the hospital, the child was sent home with mother, and they now photograph the child with this action figure on every birthday. And here he is on his 4-year-old birthday. So it reminded me, for whatever reason, the dots connected with a tape I had heard of an old service by Charles Fillmore, where he talked about the Christ. And he said, the Christ came to show us that we really are supermen, and that through evolving our consciousness, we can all become, in our own ways, supermen and superwomen. And so I just thought that this kind of complemented Bob's talk. So thank you for indulging me as I shared that little piece.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you. Thank you. That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. So now is the time when we get to support, uplift, and empower our spiritual community through freely given love offerings. And we encourage you, no matter what amount you're comfortable in giving, to make sure you make the effort to give, no matter how small, because you want to adopt the consciousness of someone who has enough to give. You want to be someone who can always give. And so it doesn't matter how much it is. If you're short of funds, even if it's $1, be someone who can give, and the benefits to you through your own consciousness of stepping into that reality of being someone who has enough to be more than just in survival mode, but to be in thriving mode.